Beneath the towering shadow of the Washington Monument lies a humble stone that was once intended to mark nothing less than the center of the world. The Jefferson Pier Stone, a 3-foot-high granite marker, was not just a survey point. It was a bold statement by Thomas Jefferson to sever the New World from the Old by establishing a new prime meridian in Washington, D.C. But as history often does, things didn't go according to plan. This stone, meant to symbolize America's independence from British influence, fell into obscurity. Its story buried beneath centuries of shifting priorities, construction projects. So how did this ambitious symbol of American autonomy become just another overlooked artifact of the National Mall? And why is its intended purpose quietly abandoned? Stay tuned to find out, as today we uncover the history of the Jefferson Pier Stone. I'm your host Ryan Sokash, and you're watching It's History. Let's start off centuries ago in 1790, when a new country called the United States of America needed to find a comfortable location to call their nation's capital. With the passage of the Residence Act of 1790, the area of modern-day Washington, D.C. was decided on as the new center of government. The documentation specifically noted a spot on the Potomac River as the appropriate grounds for this settlement. With a proposed timeline of 10 years, George Washington, the first acting president of the U.S., chose a French volunteer during the American Revolutionary War named Peter Charles L'Enfant to produce the plan for the nation's new capital, and what would eventually become Washington, D.C. was visualized in these plans. Another collaborator on the project was Andrew Ellicott, who measured a new prime meridian for the plan, one that would pass through the eventual U.S. Capitol building. For clarification, a prime meridian is essentially a north-south line chosen by humans to represent the center chasm of the world that all other people are to discuss any coordinates about. Hence, with an impassioned push by none other than Thomas Jefferson himself, this move towards a new prime meridian was done in direct defiance of British-dominated spheres of science and political influence. This step echoes the rampant theme of post-colonial separation from Europe in America at the time. While planning, L'Enfant decided that the residences of the presidents and Congress's quarters would run along the same line as a theoretical right-angle triangle. To complete the imaginary three-sided shape, it was also approved for George Washington's horse statue to be erected south of the eventual White House and west of the eventual Capitol building. The design to create such an honorary project was made back in 1783 during the Congress of the Confederation. Eventually, sidestepped numerous times, the project was finally completed in 1860 in a different location, Washington Circle. But let's not yet forget about the Pier Stone. Years later, in 1804, New York and Philadelphia had completed their tenure as the nation's capital, and D.C. was in the 4th year of replacing them in that role. Thomas Jefferson oddly called for the creation of a brand new meridian to strike through the White House while he was serving as president. Now involved in his second go at altering the prime meridian, the president supported the engineering and surveying of Isaac Briggs in his use of transit and equal altitude instruments. With the drawing of the new prime meridian, the imaginary line extended south of the White House and passed through a line that stretched out west of the Capitol building. On October the 15th, 1804, at the precise location where the two governmental lines crossed, the surveyor of the city of Washington, Nicholas King, commissioned a small pier stone that symbolized the United States of America's prime meridian. By removing a grounded wooden stake from that same site, which had been there since 1793, he intended to mark the meridian site. The project team gained a stronger sense of American permanence with the arrival of a sturdier structure on December the 18th, 1804. The Pier Stone, though a smaller relic, replaced what might have been George Washington on a horse in a world remarkably similar to ours. King also requested drawn lines and a flat freestone on top, but most significantly, the new prime meridian appeared to be officially recognized, at least partially. Though, upon deeper investigation, this was probably not much more than an appearance, since not an act of Congress nor the voice of the president certified that this marker was to be officially recognized. Regardless, it created what would be referred to as one of the 4 different Washington meridians that have been laid out in Washington, D.C. throughout its history. Its marker consisted of a pier that peaked from the ground with a stone laid on top, a rather simple design. all things considered. With a name like Pier Stone, many stories were imagined in response to this almost nautical title. For example, one rumor suggested that when the Washington Monument was being constructed in 1848, this little stone was used to moor sea craft, which was quite ridiculous indeed, but this type of folk story contributes to the mystique surrounding the Jefferson Pier. Anyhow, the stone would soon be destroyed somewhere in the early 1870s by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. While doing maintenance and cleanup in the area, they believed they were doing a service by only leaving roughly 20 inches of the Jefferson Pier foundation, not realizing the historical significance of the materials they were grounding. Regardless, on December the 2nd, 1889, a draftsman named John Stewart erected a replacement stone on that very same foundation. The revitalization of the marker was done on command of the officer in charge of public buildings and grounds at the time, Colonel O.H. Ernst, demonstrating the spirit of the post-American Civil War push to find relics that united the country through common heritage. Although quite small, the Jefferson Pier story is inherently tied to the significance of America as a separate entity from the rest of the world. Ultimately, the British Greenwich Meridian would one day be set as the prime meridian for the United States in 1912, perhaps disheartening to Thomas Jefferson in his grave, as the whole country would now rely on British politics yet again. Though it should be pointed out that at this point, British-American relations had changed quite drastically over the decades since the Revolution. The Jefferson Memorial was laid on the same old prime meridian that the White House and the Jefferson Pier found themselves on together, demonstrating a respect for Jefferson that spreads beyond the monument's quarters and to the entire longitude it resides on. Along that longitude, the Jefferson Pier Stone still rests, standing proud on the National Mall, 391 feet northwest of the Washington Monument Center. Its front reads as follows. Quote, position of Jefferson Pier erected December the 18th, 1804. Recovered and re-erected on December the 2nd, 1889, District of Columbia. Just before the last line, which says District of Columbia, is a scratched out phrase that reads, quote, being the center point of the, and it ends abruptly. But I suppose it was intended to say being the center of the world, which would have been false information at the time of inscription, as well as today. Hence, its incorrectness is why it's scratched across. Nowadays, the National Park Service takes good care of the Washington Monument's smaller sibling, and I'd say that in instances like this, we can truly question how close fascinating pieces of history are to us. Within eyesight of one of the most well-known monuments in the US, and potentially the world, is the Jefferson Pier Stone, missed by many, but appreciated by the few who are aware. But we'll leave it there for today, but if you liked this episode, don't miss our story on the forgotten Illinois-Indiana state border by clicking right here. Otherwise, I hope you'll consider subscribing, and until next time, I'm Ryan Sokash, signing off.